Hello, good morning. So I'm Simon Kay. I'm a motion capture supervisor at DNEG, and I'm here today to talk about phenomenal motion capture power in a tiny little living space, or how I ended up staring at a blank wall in my wife's dressing gown holding some flip-flops. So the first time I used an X10 system was back in 2008 on a film called Paul. So the idea here was to gather as much reference as we could of Seth Rogen, who you could see there in the suit just next to Nick Frost. And gather as much reference as we could of him because he was playing the voice of Paul. So we used that reference then to create the character of Paul. And this is normally what most people think of when they think of a motion capture shoot. They think of people in tight-fitting lycra outfits covered in shiny ping pong balls, or in the case of this conference, some tiny little orange Max boxes. But the advantage of these tiny little orange Max boxes, or to give them the proper name, inertial measurement unit, is you can take the system pretty much anywhere. So this could be a location like a woodland, like Ryan had already mentioned. I don't know why woodlands are quite a popular place to go, but we could be in a woodland like this, or we could take it to massive sound stages like this, or we could be in a tiny little tent inside one of those massive sound stages. And actually inside that, there was three of us. So this is my workstation in that tent. So I'm on this side. To my left was a facial capture guy, and then behind us was an actor. So sometimes we work in very small spaces as well as very big spaces. But the idea is always the same. So the idea is to capture as much reference as possible of the performance so that we can recreate that as accurately as possible on our character. And this doesn't always mean sort of creating a one-for-one copy or digital makeup. The idea is to compare the performance that you've captured on set or with your performer, and then use that and compare it to what your character's doing in the shot. And then you need to check to make sure that your character's portray the same sort of emotional content, that the actions and the things that he's doing have that same emotional content as your performer. And sometimes they do straight away, it's quite an easy transfer, and sometimes they don't. And when they don't, then you have to go back to your reference material and figure out what does your character look like doing the performance that your live action performer's doing, so you can bring back that sort of emotional content. And this is one of the things you sort of have to remember, that you're creating a living, breathing character. So there's a great quote by Chuck Jones when he was talking about Bugs Bunny, and he said, so when they were drawing Bugs Bunny, they said the idea was not to invent what Bugs Bunny did, but to report his doings. And this is a great sort of idea of creating a character. And Jörg mentioned this morning, which I thought was great, where he talked about if he went into a cafe, all the time he was thinking about his character Nanori. You think about where would she sit in the coffee shop if she came in? Would she sit in the center, or would she sit in the corner? If she was on a plane, what would she have to drink? Would she have sweets, or would she have nuts? And it's all these kind of ideas that you're creating to create your character. Because what you want to be doing is thinking of your character in these events and then report what they're doing. So the idea there is you put your digital character in a live action environment or in a digital environment, and then you see how your character reacts to that situation. And by doing that, you're creating this illusion of life where your character is then reacting to the world around them, to make them appear alive, which is, you know, what animation is all about, is to invoke life. This is definitely the case when we were working on Paul. They wanted a film about a character and two people and an alien that were traveling around America. They didn't want two people and a visual effect. So another advantage of being able to take your system wherever you want is to have the system live on set. So you can create this sort of virtual dress rehearsal where your character can try on, which sounds a little bit wrong, but your performer can try on the character and begin to explore the character that they're going to be playing. So the way the character moves, the way the character stands, how they look, and how all this sort of behaves and affects their performance. And when you do this kind of thing on set, you can see performers physically change the way they sort of stand, the way they hold themselves, the way they move, purely by looking at themselves as the character they're playing. So it's like looking in a mirror and trying on a costume. And sometimes it literally is like looking in a mirror. So we can run the system live, you can transfer that data onto your character, and then the performer can stand in front of a virtual mirror or a TV screen, as it's more commonly known, and they can start moving around and see their actions reflected back to themselves, but on the character, the same as they would if they were looking in a mirror. And this real-time setup allows you to see what the performance looks like on your character as well, which is really important. If you're playing a human's playing a human, then the transfers, what you're seeing on set or what you're seeing on the stage, they're very similar. But if your character's different proportionally, say they're an alien with a massive head, then what looks like a very subtle motion on a human when they move their head around, when you transfer that onto a character where the majority of them is their head and that's filling sort of 3/4 of the screen, what looks like a very small motion on set could be a huge motion, gets amplified by the size of the character's head. So sometimes you need to have this sort of feedback where you can see what the performance is actually transferring like onto your character, especially like I say, if they're not human. Then the other thing that you need to understand when you start doing these things is that sometimes this helps the performer because they can then see how the actions that they're performing are showing up on their character. So this gives them a chance to sort of explore how they move, but also figure out the sort of limits of their character. So they can start to look at like what kind of range of motion can they do, because they're obviously on a stage, they're moving around. They can begin to explore like, can a character move with the same range of motion as the character that they're playing? You know, if they put their arms down, does that penetrate inside the body? Where are their heads in relation to their head? Is it exactly the same size? Or do they have to think, well, actually my head's really big, so that's going to change maybe the way I move? And some of this you can do through sort of muscle memory of showing a performer how they look like as a character and have them sort of move around and give them an idea. But really, if you want them then to interact with themselves, so if they have to scratch their nose or something, what you want to do then is create some sort of prosthetics. So the idea is you create something that your character can have that they can immediately relate to. So for the example of scratching your nose, what you don't want is for your performer to be on set and then you ask them to scratch their nose for whatever reason, and they reach up and they have to sort of look off to one side in the screen, and then you can see them sort of reaching around for their nose and they have to sort of guess. What you need to do is build something that they can see and relate to, so that when they go to scratch their head, scratch their nose, they can just bring their hand up, scratch their nose and put it back down. They don't have to think about where the object is in space in relation to them. They've got something that represents that to them in the real world. And the other way you could do it is as well, if your character's a different size or a different shape than the performer, and every time your performer puts their arms down, their arms go inside the character's arms, go inside the character's body, rather than have your performer say, oh, well, you need to stand with your arms sort of slightly out or a little bit further forwards or backwards. Rather than doing that, what you can do is you can put padding inside the costume so the actor can still put their arms down. They don't have to worry about, oh, when I put my arms down, I have to do this. And then I have to also do a performance and then think about, oh, when I'm doing this, I have to do this. You know, they can focus on getting the performance that they want and sort of being in that moment that actors want to be in. So what you want to do is take as much of the thought process out of how they relate to their character out of the way by creating these sort of physical parts of the costume for them to wear. And also the costumes can have a big impact on the way people move. So the reverse of that could be, remember your performers wearing a tight-fitting lycra outfit that's super stretchy, they can move around really easy, but that might not be the case for your character. So imagine you're wearing a tight-fitting lycra costume, which is effectively a sort of pair of trousers, and you squat down. Now, you don't have to worry about what you're doing with your legs as such. But now imagine you put those actions onto a character in a game and she's wearing a short skirt. Now, when this happens, what you might have to do is just adjust those legs ever so slightly so that your character, you know, maintains some of the modesty a little bit. And this actually happened on one of the first times I used motion capture on a game I was working on at the time, a game called Alias. We had the actress on the stage, and she performed these actions of sort of getting down into cover, and she crouched down, and it all looks great. And you think, yeah, that's wonderful. And then when you get it back on the character, some of the costumes that she wore in the game, because they had lots of different costumes to wear, one of those, she was actually wearing like a couple of them, she had a skirt on. So when she crouched down, we had to adjust the pose ever so slightly just to maintain a modesty. Another thing you have to think about is the physicality of your performance. What the physicality of the performer brings to the character, or what the character needs to have to create that performance. So if you think of if you're creating a character that's a digital human, and you want to go one for one, you're using something like a metahuman, then you want to try and find your performer that's the same size, weight, and same physicality as the character they're playing, so your transfer is a lot better. But if you're playing something like a 4-foot alien or a 12-foot orc, then obviously those kind of people aren't easy to come across. So, but the idea is the same. What you want to do is try and find the same physicality. So you need to think about the way your character moves, and then try and cast a performer with that sort of behavior in mind. So something like Ex Machina, where Alicia Vikander, so she had a background in ballet, and what she wanted to do was bring those sort of ballet qualities, the grace and the sort of poise that a ballet performer has, and she wanted to bring that into the character that she was playing. So this kind of thing is the kind of thing that you could bring into your virtual characters or your CG characters when you're playing them. Try and find a performer that's going to be able to perform the actions in the way that suits your character. And then if you don't have a character, or you don't have a performer that's going to play your character, then you need to find an animator who's got time to come and jump in the suit. So this is Jim, one of our animators and previous supervisors at DNEG. So normally as an animator, you create video reference. So you might have seen these where they do like a side-by-side. They have a video reference of the animator working through their scene, and then at the side of it you'll see sort of the progression of the shot from initial sort of blocking stages through to spline animation through to the final thing. Well, the MVN system can be used in a very similar way to this. So if you think of it like a video reference plus, so as well as recording themselves with a video, they could also record themselves with the MVN system. What this allows them to do is the animator can come down, they can put the suit on pretty quickly once they get used to getting in the suit. So 15 minutes, you can have the system calibrated, up and running, ready to go. And then the animator can start working on their shot ideas. So sometimes it'll be an animator that comes down on their own. Sometimes it'll be the sort of team of animators. So it might be a couple of animators and the supervisors. And then they'll come down and they'll work through the shots. Or sometimes it might be an animator that's got a particular set of skills. They might be, you know, martial arts or dance or something like that. Or you might have a female animator that's animated a male character or vice versa. So you need somebody to come down and sort of play that role. And then they usually ask them nicely or provide them with some kind of bribe or something like that, and get them to sort of act out the skills and the performance that they need. So once the animator is calibrated, they can begin to test out their ideas. So the idea is usually what happens is the animator will get briefed with a shot, something that they have to do. Or it could be they've got some ideas that they want to capture, something that they're using for their shot. And sort of like thumbnails, what they can do is they'll come down, they'll put on the suit, they'll start with their first idea, and then that usually takes them sort of 2 or 3 attempts to go through that. And then they can then build on that idea. So they'll capture their sort of initial idea, and then because they're in the suit and they're actually out, they'll start thinking about other ideas as they start moving through it. So it could be they'll start with making the action bigger or making the action smaller, or they might do something a little bit quicker, or they might do it a bit slower. Or if they're doing like a dialogue scene, they might start sat down and then stand up, or they might start standing and then sit down, or they might just stay standing up. But they start working through all these ideas, and they can start testing out and getting these sort of happy accidents of things as they build. And it becomes like this sort of stream of consciousness, like sat down, you know, sketching at an idea, you might draw a picture, you might think, oh, that really works. Or if you're actually out, you'll sort of do some movement and you think, oh, that really works, but what about if they do this? Or how about if they try this? Or what about if you want to try this? Or, oh, now we've tried that, actually, so it would look better if they did it like this. So you can quickly sort of iterate over ideas and sort of try all these things, you know, and maybe an hour, 2 hours later, you've got 20 different versions, 20 or 30 different versions of the same shot. So it's like working through those sort of bad drawings, get them all out of your system, but you're sort of trying all different ideas. And the advantage of this is once the data is ready, you can batch export that through the MVN software, put that back onto your character, and then the next morning the animator can have that data back. They then put that data onto their characters and they can start dropping it in shots. The advantage of this is that they can go through the takes and start reviewing what the action looks like on their character from the camera that you're going to be seeing it in. Which is really important as well. So if you're using an in-game camera, you might have to make sure that the animation looks good from any angle. But if you're using, if it's a cut scene or like a movie, then you're working from a shot-specific camera. So the action that you're performing needs to work from that camera. So they can start going through all these actions, and immediately they may get sort of 10 or so that they know straight off the bat they just don't work for whatever reason. The action doesn't look right on a character, or it doesn't work from the camera angle they're doing. And then they can go through the rest of the files, and they might find, say, 10 or 15 files that they really like. They can work those up, make them a little bit better, just touch a few bits up, and then they can go to their animation supervisor or the animation director. They can show the work to them. They can give feedback on that. And maybe they'll select maybe 5 of those. They can then show those 5 to the director. And if you're really lucky, the director will immediately like one of those, and you can start animating. But if not, he might like half of one, maybe take 1, and he might like the end of take 3. Or if you're lucky as well, he may say, actually, I don't like these, but what I do like is, and he'll describe something that hopefully you've captured before, so you can go back to that. But if you're really unlucky, then you have to go back and you can shoot again. But this time, you've got a really good idea of what to capture. So you've already worked through quite a lot of ideas. As an animator, you've seen what works and what doesn't in your shot. So you've already got an idea of the kind of actions that are and aren't going to work. And also you've spoke with your supervisor or anim director or the director. So you've got a clear idea of what they want as well based on what they've seen. So it's not sort of ideas that they're talking about in their head, it's what's actually showing up on the screen. So now you can start going back in and capturing some new versions of what you had before based on what you've sort of learned from what you did before. And also because this is quite a quick process, so like I say, like sketching, it's easier for the animator to work through quickly and then get rid of if it doesn't work. If you have to animate something, then you've invested time and money, because everything's dictated by money and these kind of things. You've invested time and money into these kind of things. So you don't really want to start giving them, you don't really want to start throwing them away. But if you've had the process of working through these and it's quite a quick sort of process, it's a bit easier for you to just sort of put them to one side like you would if you'd done lots of sketches on a piece of paper and move on to the next one. The other handy thing about using motion capture for this blocking process is motion capture is easier to understand than step keys animation. And there's an important distinction to make here. So motion capture is easier to understand to look at, but it's a nightmare to edit. Step keys are easier to edit, but it's not always clear what's going on. So motion capture, when you do motion capture, you get a keyframe in every frame, and all the actions are linked together, so you can't sort of go in and take out a few keyframes without affecting what's come before, what's come after. It's quite a nightmare to sort of edit. But if you're showing that to somebody that's never seen animation before, or you've got that, they can immediately look at it and they can tell what's going on. If you've got step keys, so step keys are very easy to edit. So they're the sort of story poses. If you've seen where you get the sort of blocky character moving around through space, if you've seen any of the sort of behind the scenes things, they're the sort of story poses. So what you've got there is a pose on one frame, and then you've got some frames in between, and then another pose, and all the keyframes on the same pose are on the same frame with nothing in between them. So if you need to change a pose, you can quickly go to that frame, change the pose and move on, or delete the pose, but you've still got the animation either side. You could just delete it, it's gone, the animation carries on as before. But the problem with that is when you see stepped key animation, it can be quite difficult sometimes if you're not used to seeing it to be able to picture what that's going to look like when it's finished. So sometimes when you're looking at these kind of things, it can be easier to read the motion capture than it can with step keys. And this can help if you've got somebody, if you're working with a client that's not used to seeing step keys, then when they see the motion capture, they can easily see it. So you don't have to take the step keys as far. So sometimes you have to take, rather than just doing the step keys, you have to then move on and do it a little bit further, and you almost get into final. And to do that takes a lot of time. And obviously you're spending more time, and by the time you get to that stage, if they don't like it, then you've got to throw it away, and then it becomes a little bit more tricky. There's a lot more sort of time, money that you're spending to get to that point. So with the motion capture, it's easy to understand, it's a nightmare to edit, where step keys are a little bit harder to look at. So I just want to make that distinction before people think motion capture is better than animation. That's not what I'm saying here. What I'm saying is one is easier to read straight away than the other, but the end result is they're both really good. So I have to get out of the way because I work with a lot of animators who'd string up if I said anything like that. So, and because the animators are involved through this entire process, what they do is they create creative control over the thing that they're doing. So it's not they get to come up with the idea when they're sat at their desk. They then sketch out a few ideas based on that, or based on the conversation that they've had with their animation supervisor, their director. And then they can come down, they put the suit on, they act out the ideas, they come up with the ideas while they're still in the suit. They then go back and work through the ideas that their ideas as the character that they like. And then they then make creative decisions of how they're going to edit that. And if somebody asks them, why did you do this, or why did you do that, why is this like this, they've still made that creative decision about how they've changed the things. So they've always got creative control at the end. And then finally, when they've found the take that works and they work that motion capture up, that it's their animation that they're seeing on screen that they've created, that they've been involved with from start to end. So it not only gives them sort of complete control over the animation, but it also reduces the amount of time they spend on this sort of blocking stage to get an idea across, which is really good because then you can get this sort of blocking stage out of the way, but it gives you more time for the rest of the project to actually do the things that they like, which is the animated side of things. So once we've got the different ways of capturing people, and we've got the different ways of testing out ideas, we can sort of combine these and we come into the wonderful world of previs. So normally when you start any project, you'll start with a script or a storyboard, and you want to create that storyboard and try and turn it into something that's moving, a sort of rough cut of your film. So one of the ways you can do that is to use the XN's MBN system for capturing the actions that your characters are going to be doing. So the idea is to take something from a written page and transfer it to make a sort of rough edit of your film so that you can see what's going to be, what the final film is going to look like, and start answering some of the sort of creative and technical questions. So we've already seen you can take the MBN system pretty much anywhere. So it could be if you want to capture performance in a specific environment. So we've gone into a dance studio if you need to capture dancers for whatever reason, or you might need to go to a specific location. Or sometimes you need to find a vehicle. Sometimes you can go and find that vehicle, or sometimes like this, you can recreate a proxy version or a mocap friendly version of that vehicle in your studio. So this is actually the Cessna plane that you can see on the wall. I'll let you figure out how it all works, but we can create these sort of environments inside using the sort of proxy versions, mocap versions of the thing. So we can take the XN system sort of wherever it needs to be to catch those kind of things. So one of the main things that previs is used is to sort of start by creating an idea, a talking point where people can get an idea of what's going on in the film. So one thing that you can learn very quickly is what I'm seeing in my head when I describe something to you may not be what you're seeing in your head as I'm describing it. So the idea with the previs is to create this image so that you can show people, so everybody's looking at the same image, so that you're all talking about the same things, and then you can make creative decisions based on that. So this could be something simple as like where your characters are going to stand, and then where the camera is going to go in relation to them, or it could be something much more complicated, like if you've got multiple characters in your shot, and you need to figure out where everybody needs to stand, and then maybe you've got a virtual character or CG character that's not even actually going to be on set, where you're going to have to stand people so they're not in the way, where you're going to put the camera so that it's everybody's in frame. And so to do this, just like any motion capture suit, you need to figure out blocking. So you start with where your characters need to start and end the action, what they're going to do in between, what the environment's like that they're going to be in, whether you're actually in the environment, or whether you're using a proxy of the environment, or whether you're just using your own imagination. And the next thing, the other things to sort of think about are your normal sort of acting, directing kind of things about what's just happened before this scene, what's going to happen next. And also sometimes you need to figure out like how one person's going to play 2, 3, even 4 different characters in the same scene. Because a lot of this you're doing quite quickly. It's quite small budgets, quite quick sort of turnarounds and things. So you don't necessarily always want to go and hire 3 or 4 different people to come and do this one thing. You might just have 1 or 2 people that act out all different parts. So you need to figure out what order you need to do them in and where everybody is in relationship to each other. And then you can go in and capture actions, much like we did, like the animator did. They come down, rather than shooting 20 or 30 different versions, we maybe shoot 1 or 2 different versions to get the idea of the action that we want to be. And And then once we've got that, we can then take that motion capture, we put it onto our characters, and then you can start building out the shot. So you can add in your characters, you can put them in the environment, you can add some cameras, some lights, some props. Obviously, this is quite an oversimplification. There's a lot more work goes into it than that. But then you can start building out these shots and building a rough cut of your film. And you can start reviewing what the shots look like with everybody looking at the same image. And then, because sometimes, you know, the sort of image that you had in your head or the image that you had on the storyboard panel looks good there, but when you actually see it moving with the people moving or with the camera moves, then it might not work exactly the same way as you want, or you might think, is there a better way of doing it? And so you can go back then and you can reshoot maybe the blocking with the motion capture, or you can change the camera angle, but you're sort of figuring out a lot of these sort of creative ideas and technical things before you actually arrive on set. So this is a much faster way of sort of working through all those technical questions that you might have, and also the creative decisions that you need to make. You can do all this before you arrive on set, where you've got a full film crew waiting around and all the time and money that goes into that. So it frees you up to actually work on set and work out a lot of the things before you actually even arrive on set. So now we've got our phenomenal mocap power, move into the tiny little office space. So like many people, the last few months I've been working from home. And as the person that can run the MVN system, I had the pleasure, I want to say, of being able to bring it home and then turn in my house, or this room that I'm actually in now, into a home office, a home motion capture studio. So like I said at the start, most people usually think of motion capture in these sort of big stages, wide open spaces, but obviously you can't do that at home. But weirdly, or luckily, we did manage to capture pretty much everything that we've needed to do. I've managed to do in this room and then just outside the door to my right on the landing. We managed to capture most things that we've needed. You know, I mean, big stunts like wall flips and anything too crazy like that were a little bit off, because I can only work with what I've got and the skills and space that I have. But we have managed to capture quite a lot of what we needed. It's surprising how much motion capture you can get into a tiny little space. And also, because we're using the MVN system, I can set it up at home. I can fit it into this office. And if I move from this office out through the door, like an optical system, you would need another set of cameras, or you'd have to be able to move between spaces. You don't have to worry about things like that. And then it was in the middle of one of these sessions, sort of when I was face down on my landing carpet, I thought, I wonder if I could do this and show people that you could actually do this at home. Now I've done it a couple of times successfully. For more indie developers and people that are looking to get into this kind of thing, where motion capture is becoming more affordable and more available for people to use. But they're thinking, oh, I can't do that because you need, you know, a big space, you need lots of actors and professional actors, and lots of equipment and lots of people to be able to do these kind of things. So I thought, could I create something in my own house using the MVN system? But in the limited sort of confines that I have. So the brilliant idea I had was to recreate the shootout from the lobby shootout from The Matrix. I've no real idea why. It seemed like a good idea at the time. I guess it's one of those sort of iconic movie sequences. And it looks like, you know, if you were thinking you were going to do this, you'd think, oh, we need to go to a big space where we can set these kind of things up, and we're going to need a couple of actors, actress, and then, you know, all the people to play all the different security guards and things like that. So yeah, it seemed like a good idea. So first thing I had to do was find out if I could actually get a motion capture system for doing this. So I reached out to the lovely people at XN's and asked them if I could borrow one of their systems, and they were kind of to say yes, because without them, none of this would have been possible. So once I had my mocap system, I then had to go through and start creating a shot list. So this is the same approach that you'd use whatever motion capture shoot you're doing. So you write a detailed list of everything that you want to capture. So this was who all the characters were for each shot, what characters they were, what they were doing, even down to like what foot they started walking with, which hand the prop was in, how many steps they took. Because then I had to work out how I could fit that motion with that number of steps, with those sort of turns and different angles inside the space that I'm in now. And although you think, well, that's because you're in a tiny space, if you go on a motion capture stage or you go and shoot anything anywhere, this is one of the things that you have to figure out, is where your action will fit in this place that you're capturing. Sometimes you can have a massive open space, but sometimes you might be in a very confined space. So you might have certain things where you have to move around, or you might have actions that you can capture and you have to split them into two different things for safety, or for the way they have to be performed. So you do have to think, whatever size space you're using, whatever system you're using, how you're going to be able to capture these actions. And then once I got that and figured out how I was going to fit it inside those space, you also have to think about what direction you're starting with. So which way your character is going to head, what way they're facing, what way they start facing, what way they end facing, what props they've got, and things like that. And then also technical things, like if you're doing a game, if you're working on game animations, sometimes you'll have limits of what the characters can do. So this could be, when you perform this action, you can only move 1 meter forward, or when you do that walk, it needs to be 5 steps and then you stop, or at this point you need to turn 90 degrees. So although you're doing these and you think it's because they're in the constraints of doing them in a house, they're actually the same things that you would do on any motion capture suit. And then because the system was so small and compact, I was able to put it up in my home office and install it. A little bit slower than this, but you can fit it in sort of any sort of small area. You can see there I just need a laptop, and then there's a router on the side. So you can install this in quite a small space. This room is, I think it's about 2 meters by 1.5 meters across. So I set the system up in here and use this as my sort of capture studio. Then I had to figure out how to wire the suit for me to put it on, because normally I'm wiring a suit and giving it to somebody else. And when I do that, usually I put in the battery packs and the transmitter packs and some of the extra sensors I put on afterwards. But obviously with this, I can't do that because some of them are quite difficult to fit if you're already in the suit. So I found a way of being able to wire the suit, put everything in, and then get the suit on. And then the calibrating, I could calibrate myself. Luckily, I've described it so many times to different people over the years. I know what it should do. Whether I'm stood like it, I'm not exactly sure because I can't see myself, but I know what I should be doing to try and get into the right pose. And also in the system, you can do a hands-off calibration. So it gives you like a countdown where it counts down to give you time to get into the sort of first end pose that you do before you do it. If you know the calibration, you start in an end pose and you do a walk forward. So you can use this hands-off calibration mode to get you into the end pose before you start before you start doing the calibration. And then after that, once I was calibrated, I then spent about 2 days running this setup with the system set up in my room. I spent about 2 days capturing all the actions that I needed for all the different characters, for all the different shots. So that was for Trinity and Neo, and then all the various security guards and SWAT teams. And just working through the different sheets, looking at where I've broken it down, so I know where I'm starting, where I'm ending, which way I need to face, how many steps I need to take, what props I need, or what standing props I needed. And then just going through each shot until I've got what I needed. And usually I gave it sort of 2 or 3 attempts. Sometimes it took a little bit more. But I was able to capture sort of everything that I needed to recreate the sequence that I was doing. And then since then, I've been working on creating a sequence in Motion Builder. So I've been documenting the process. I have a YouTube channel where I do tutorials on Motion Builder. So that's why I'm using Motion Builder and not one of these new fancy Unreal or anything like that. So I went through and took all the data that I captured in there, and then you put it into this tool in Motion Builder called Story, which is like the tool in, I forget what it's called in Unreal, where you sort of build all the clips. So you can put all your clips in for all the different characters and sort of build out the shot from there. So I've been documenting this as part of the on my YouTube channel. But if you're not interested in that, I've also got a video where I explain exactly how I set up the system, how I wired the suit so that I could wear it myself, how I calibrated, and what to look for when you're doing a calibration, how I capture the data, the different processing types, and how you can stream data into the MVN system, from the MVN system, sorry, into Motion Builder. So once I did that, I'm currently sort of working through it as I can in my spare time. So where I'm at the moment. This is as far as I've got. So the video that you're about to see is sort of where I'm up to. So this is just before the SWAT team come in and stop Neo and Trinity in their tracks. It's worth pointing out as well, this animation that you're going to see, so this is the what we call raw data, so it's unprocessed. It's straight from, so it's had the HD processing done to it, but I've not done any animation changes over the top. So the only thing I've done, like you can see with these two characters here, is I've actually put props in their hands, so and animated the fingers. So everything else, all the other stuff that you see actually on the characters, is the raw transfer from the MVN character onto the characters in this shot. So if I just play this. So that's where I'm up to the moment. I did capture the rest of the sequence, but it takes a while to put these together, especially outside my day job. So the plan is to recreate the whole thing. And like I said, I'm going to be documenting that and following through inside Motion Builder on my YouTube channel. But it's also worth pointing out, so the distance that you see Trinity and Neo walk from the bag scanner to where they've stopped here is exactly the same number of steps as it is from the wall just to my left here, all the way to the wall just at the other end of the landing. And also the flip-flops, they make a good sort of Beretta stand-in. And that's how I ended up standing there in my wife's dressing gown with a pair of flip-flops in my hand.
Hey, Simon, thanks again for this amazing talk. It's always good to listen to your stories, and I really love your tiny technical space. So that's definitely a good thing.
Thanks for inviting me. Yeah, I mean, it's been great to talk, and hopefully it's...
Yeah, absolutely. So we do have a question. I mean, a few questions from a couple of our listeners. So to start off with the first, how do the environment heights differences influence the capture data? If you can basically capture anywhere inside and outside, do you also measure the surroundings like stairs or maybe more difficult hills when you're in a forest? And does this end up being the more time-consuming part versus the actual performance capture?
Yeah, that's a good question. It depends. Sometimes the performance influences how the geometry and things are built, and sometimes you do it the opposite way around. And then, yeah, it's very difficult because you're also transferring from your human person onto your character. If they're not the same size, there's a difference that you get there. So yeah, sometimes, so on a film set, you LiDAR the set, so you actually create a digital scan of the whole set, so that you know like where the different angles are. And then if you're transferring that animation motion capture onto a character, then you'll fit into that environment. If not, then you build the environment, and the easy way around to do it is to do the animation on your character and then fit the environment to the character's motions. But yeah, it does depend sort of what you're doing. For games, things tend to be sort of standard heights. So you're looking at like maybe all tables are like a meter or something, and then some half meters. So you're sort of planning around those kind of things. And then when you go and capture it, you'll look at creating props that mimic that same sort of height. So that section of plane that you saw, they were based on measurements of the plane, where the door was, where the wings were, and things like that. So so you have to find a solution that fits the project that you're working on.
Yeah, I mean, it's amazing to see what you can do in tiny space like that, especially with the whole Matrix project that you did. So one of the questions as well is, do you see that more like one-man band projects that you've done are coming up in the future, also by yourself, but also by different people?
Yeah, I mean, there's somebody. The first thing that springs to mind is Corey Strasberg. If you go and see what he's doing on his own with the XN system, there's projects like that. So there's definitely places. And that was on earlier with his character. There is him as the main sort of driving force, but then there's a team behind it. And then the more you have to do for the character, like in films and things, it's a vast number of people that go to creating the one character that you see on scene. There's teams of animators, riggers, modelers, textures, shaders. There's a whole sort of team. So it does depend on the budget, but I think, yeah, there's definitely sort of places for each individual level. And now that with your system where things are becoming more available, people are starting to look at these kind of things, of individual things and projects to work.
No, that's definitely good to hear. And I think one thing that will make lives even easier for one-man bands like you is that with the next release, we will have on-the-go calibration. So we're redoing the calibration process within our software, where you will get audio cues, which will make your hands-off calibration a lot better, which again will make your life a bit easier as well. So definitely something to look out for in the near future.
Yeah.
And I have one more question. So I know you're a heavy motion builder user, well, since the beginning of time probably. And I've seen that you're now using Unreal as well. Do you have the feeling that the industry is going towards certain tools? And do you have specific preferences for one versus the other, or can you enlighten us a little bit on that as well?
Yeah, I mean, there's always the thing of what's new and what's fancy and shiny that people want to use going on. But yeah, Motion Builder, the usual comparison I get is with Maya. What's the difference? But like with all these software, it comes down to what your budget is, what you can afford to use, and what you're going to be doing with it. So something like Unreal, where you can do a lot of the rendering and everything inside the one package. There's a lot of companies starting to use that as their sort of go-to one piece of software. And I know Unreal are trying to get as much Epic, are trying to get as much content into there to allow you to do it. Like they've now got the animation rigs and things like that in. And I guess like any tool, there'll be people that'll pick that up and use that as their main tool. Whether we will in sort of films and games, because the thing is finding people that can use these new tools as well, whereas you've got a wide sort of user base for Max and Maya and those kind of things. When you bring in new software, it's getting the people that can do it. But yeah, I mean, I think there's a place for both, and they all have their own sort of strengths and things of being able to render things really quickly, or do animation in one and transfer it across, or have some sort of real time. They all sort of play together. It's really just picking out what has the bits that you want, and also what bits you can actually afford.
Yeah. So it's also a really preference thing and a project-based, maybe even.
Yeah.
Well, good. We are through the questions, so I would really like to thank you again for the great talk. Well, I hope you guys all enjoyed this as well, and hope to see you again in, I think it's about 15 minutes even. So we'll see you guys then. And Simon, thanks again.
Thanks so much, Stefan. Thanks for having me. Thanks.